Section 1. You're standing in the kitchen late at night, phone in your hand, rereading a family text that shouldn't be a big deal, but your body reacts like it is. Your chest tightens, your jaw sets, and before you type a single word, you can feel yourself getting pulled into an older version of you. Here's the hard question: if you've grown so much, why does your family still have a shortcut to your emotions? And what if the real problem isn't what they're saying, it's the speed at which you hand them control over your nervous system? The pain isn't just the argument. It's the snap back into roles you promised yourself you'd never play again. You're fine all week, then one comment from a parent makes you defensive in seconds. A sibling's joke lands like a judgment, and suddenly you're explaining yourself like you're on trial. You hang up and you don't feel relieved, you feel wrung out, like you ran a sprint without leaving your chair. And the stakes are bigger than that one conversation. If nothing changes, this keeps stealing your focus, your sleep, and your sense of dignity. It spills into your work the next day. You bring that irritation into a meeting. You take it out on your partner or your kids or your roommate. You lose hours replaying it in your head, thinking of what you should have said, and the cost is time you can't get back. So here's what you're going to get today, in a way you can actually use. You're going to learn how to prepare mentally for predictable triggers before you walk into the room or join the call. You'll learn how to respond to parents, siblings, and relatives without becoming your younger self again. And you'll learn how to leave family interactions feeling less drained, with your energy still in your hands instead of stuck in their mood. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. If you want steady Stoic Focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships every week, this is the channel for you. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Now let's get honest about what's really happening. Family triggers you differently than coworkers or strangers because your brain doesn't treat family as new information. It treats it as history. You're not just hearing a sentence, you're hearing a pattern. A tone. A familiar look. A predictable setup. Even if you're an adult with your own life, your mind can still interpret a family interaction as a test you have to pass. And that's why you can be calm with the world and still unravel in a living room you've sat in 1,000 times. And it's not always obvious. Sometimes it's not even loud. Sometimes it's a quiet guilt trip. A subtle comparison. A question that pretends to be curiosity but feels like inspection. So, are you still doing that job? When are you finally going to settle down? Why don't you call more? On the surface, it's normal conversation. Underneath, your body hears, "You're not enough," or "You owe us," or "You're still the kid we remember." And that's when your reaction starts building, tight shoulders, racing thoughts, heat in your face, before you've decided anything consciously. This is where emotional control usually breaks down. People think control means you must stay perfectly calm, or you must have the perfect comeback, or you must never feel angry. That's not it. Control means you notice the moment the old script tries to take over, and you interrupt the script before it writes the rest of the scene. It means you stop confusing familiarity with authority. Just because someone has known you a long time doesn't mean they get to access the worst parts of you for free. A lot of you are carrying a private frustration. Why am I still like this around them? You might even feel embarrassed by it. You're capable. You handle pressure. You solve problems. But with family, you can get pulled into the same emotional patterns: people-pleasing, snapping, shutting down, over-explaining, withdrawing, and proving yourself. And afterward you feel a specific kind of tiredness. Not physically tired. Morally tired. Like you lost ground. Here's the reframing that changes the whole game: family doesn't make you react. Family gives you the most practiced trigger cues, and you supply the reaction because it's been rehearsed for years. That's not to blame. That's power. Because if it's rehearsed, it can be retrained. If it's a pattern, it can be interrupted. If it's a habit, it can be replaced. And notice this: the trigger often isn't the content of the conversation. It's the meaning you assign instantly. They're disrespecting me. They don't see me. They're disappointed. They're trying to control me. Those meanings might be true, partly true, or not true, but your body reacts as if they're proven facts. This is why one message can ruin your night. Your mind doesn't just receive the message. It builds a whole courtroom around it. Evidence, accusations, defense statements, closing arguments. Then you hit send from inside that courtroom, and you wonder why it escalated. You're not going to fix family dynamics in one day. That's not the promise. The promise is smaller and more powerful. You can stop abandoning yourself in those moments. You can keep your adult mind online. You can stop paying with your peace to buy temporary approval. You can choose a response that protects your energy without turning you into a robot or a doormat. And there's another stake most people don't name. When you react the old way, you teach your own brain that family situations are dangerous. Your nervous system learns, this is a threat, prepare for impact. Then next time, you're tense before anything even happens. It becomes anticipatory stress. You think about the gathering days in advance. You rehearse conversations. You dread a phone call that hasn't happened. That's how family keeps triggering you even when they're not in the room. What we're going to do is build a different internal sequence. Not a personality transplant. A sequence. A set of small moves that keep you from getting yanked back into a version of you that no longer fits. First, you'll learn how to spot the earliest signal that you're about to regress, before the words come out sharp or the silence turns cold. Next, you'll practice a simple way to create space between their message and your reply so your body can settle and your mind can choose. Then, you'll get a few clean, natural sentences you can say that hold a boundary without starting a war. After that, you'll learn how to exit the interaction, mentally and emotionally, so you don't reply it all night. Finally, you'll watch how all of this works under pressure in a real Friday night family group chat moment where the old you almost takes the wheel, but doesn't. And here's the open loop I want you to hold on to. Later, when that group chat lights up and someone makes the exact kind of comment that usually hooks you, you're going to use one short sentence and one short pause to change the entire direction of the night, and you'll feel the relief immediately, not hours later. Section 2. The first thing you change is not what you say to your family. It's when you say anything at all. The instruction is simple, and it will feel uncomfortable at first. Stop replying immediately to emotionally loaded family messages and comments. The stakes are real. If you keep responding on impulse, you keep handing control to the oldest version of your nervous system, and every interaction becomes another rehearsal of the same role you're trying to outgrow. This matters because family triggers don't usually arrive as a big event. They show up as small moments that hit you fast. A text that feels like a dig. A question that sounds harmless but lands like judgment. A comment at dinner that makes you want to defend yourself. The old pattern is speed. You respond quickly to prove something, fix something, or protect yourself. But speed is the enemy of emotional control. When you answer in the first wave of irritation or guilt, you're not choosing your response, you're letting your body choose for you. And if you never change this, you'll keep paying for it. You'll lose evenings arguing, you'll carry resentment into the next day, and you'll keep wondering why you feel drained after a normal conversation. Here's why the pause works, in plain terms. Your body reads tone and history faster than your mind reads meaning. Family triggers often hit a stored expectation. Here we go again. That expectation floods you with energy meant for defense. Your thoughts speed up. Your words sharpen. Or you shut down and go cold. In that state, you're not at your best. You become reactive, and reactivity always has a price. The pause breaks the chain between stimulus and response. It gives your nervous system time to settle so your adult mind can come back online. Think of it like this: when you respond too fast, you're speaking from the part of you that feels cornered. When you respond after a pause, you're speaking from the part of you that has options. And this isn't about being passive. It's about being deliberate. You're not letting them win. You're refusing to let their timing decide your emotional state. This is how a calmer, more focused version of you responds instead of reacting. You don't deny the feeling. You just don't obey it. Here's the microscript you're going to use. Keep it simple and natural. I'm not going to respond to this right now. I'll get back to you later. If you can't say it to them yet, say it to yourself first. I'm not going to respond to this right now. I'll get back to this later. That's the whole movie. It creates space, and space creates choice. Now let's make it real in a North American scene that you'll recognize. It's a Wednesday night. You're on the couch after a long day. You finally got your brain to quiet down, and you're about to watch something mindless, maybe scroll a little, maybe go to bed early. Then your phone buzzes. It's a family group chat. Someone posted a photo from a get-together you didn't attend. Then a parent follows up with, "Must be nice to be too busy for family." Or a sibling says, "Look who disappeared again." The message is short, but it hits hard. Your chest tightens because it's not just today's message. It's the old accusation that you're selfish, ungrateful, or distant. Your fingers start typing immediately. The old reaction shows up. You want to defend yourself, explain your schedule, list the ways you've been trying, remind them you're exhausted, and then maybe throw a jab back because you're tired of being the villain. This is the moment most people lose control, not because they're weak, but because they're fast. So this time, you do something different. You read the message once, and you notice the urge to fire back. You feel your body leaning forward, like it's bracing for impact. You stop. You put the phone down. Not dramatically. Just down. And you say the microscript to yourself, "I'm not going to respond to this right now. I'll get back to you later." You don't negotiate with the urge. You don't just send one quick line. You let the first wave pass. 30 minutes later, your body feels different. The heat is lower. Your thoughts are less sharp. And now you can choose. Maybe you respond with something calm like, "I've had a heavy week. I care about you, and I'll call this weekend." Or maybe you decide the best response is no response tonight, because you don't want to train them to poke you for a reaction. Either way, you're not replying from the version of you that feels accused and cornered. You're replying from the version of you that can hold your ground. And here's the quiet win: even if they don't change, you do. You go to bed without replaying it for 2 hours. You don't lose your night. You don't wake up with that sour feeling of "why did I say it like that?" You keep your energy. This pause also protects you in live conversations. Picture a weekend visit. You're in the kitchen, someone asks a simple question that's actually a judgment. "So, when are you going to get serious about your life?" The old pattern is immediate heat. You either snap or you shrink. The new move is still the pause, even if it's only 3 seconds. You let the question land, you breathe once, and you decide you're not going to answer from the hook. The pause gives you a beat to remember who you want to be. Your tiny action today is concrete, measurable, and it's going to feel like taking your hands off the wheel for a second. Pick one family contact or one family thread that reliably spikes your emotions. Decide a specific reply window for the next 24 hours. You will not respond to any emotionally loaded message from that person for at least 45 minutes. Not 5 minutes. Not after I calm down for a second. 45 minutes. Put a reminder on your phone if you need to. If you want to go one step stronger, set a focus mode that silences that thread for an hour at a time. You're not doing this forever. You're doing it long enough to break the reflex. Now we're going to build the inner skill that makes this possible, because the hardest part isn't the waiting. The hardest part is what happens inside you during the waiting. The mind starts arguing. It says, "If I don't respond now, they'll think I don't care." Or, "If I don't correct this, they'll keep disrespecting me." Or, "If I wait, I'm being weak." That's where you practice. This is where emotional control becomes real. Right now, take 3 slow breaths with me, in, hold, and out. Again, in, hold, and out. One more, in, hold, and out. As you breathe, bring to mind a recent family message that hooked you. Notice what your body does when you picture it. Maybe your shoulders rise. Maybe your stomach tightens. Maybe your face gets warm. Don't fight it. Just notice it. Then say the microscript once, out loud if you can. I'm not going to respond to this right now. I'll get back to you later. Say it again, a little slower, so your body learns it's safe to pause. And one more time, calmly, like you're speaking to someone you're responsible for protecting. I'm not going to respond to this right now. I'll get back to you later. Now add one extra internal line that keeps you steady. My timing is mine. You don't have to send that to anyone. It's for you. It reminds you that urgency is often a trap. Family dynamics feed on speed. They pull you into fast reactions, quick explanations, and emotional bargaining. When you slow down, you step out of the old dance. And if you slip, because you will sometimes, don't turn it into self-hate. That's another old pattern. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is fewer impulse replies, shorter recovery time, and more moments where you stay adult in the room. Each time you pause, you're proving to yourself that you can feel the trigger without obeying it. Hold on to this pause and this one microscript, because it's the foundation. When we move forward, we're going to add a second tool that makes your eventual response clean and calm instead of defensive. And when we get to that Friday night family group chat later, this pause is the first move that keeps the whole night from going off the rails. Section 3. The next shift is about what you stop doing once you've created that pause. The instruction is this: stop over-explaining yourself to family when you feel triggered. The stakes are subtle but serious. If you keep explaining, justifying, and defending every decision, you keep teaching people and your own nervous system that your choices need approval to be valid. Over-explaining feels polite. It feels mature. It feels like you're being reasonable. But most of the time, it's not coming from clarity. It's coming from discomfort. You explain because you feel misunderstood. You justify because you feel judged. You defend because part of you still wants the argument to end with acceptance. And when you do this with family, it almost never works the way you hope. The more you explain, the more material you hand them to question, correct, or dismiss. If you never change this, you stay stuck in conversations where you're always on the back foot, always proving, always slightly smaller than you need to be. Here's why this works psychologically, without jargon. Explanation signals uncertainty when it's driven by emotion. When you calmly state a choice and stop, your body communicates stability. When you add layers of reasoning under pressure, your body communicates, please understand me. Family members who are used to old dynamics unconsciously sense that opening and push further. This isn't because they're villains. It's because patterns invite responses. A calmer, more focused version of you doesn't argue for your adulthood. They assume it. This is the identity shift underneath the behavior. You're no longer trying to convince your family that your life makes sense. You're acting like someone who already knows it does. As Seneca hints in Letters to Lucilius II, peace comes from wanting fewer external validations, not from winning more debates. When you stop explaining, you step out of the courtroom entirely. Here's the exact microscript to practice. It's short on purpose. This is what works for me right now. That's the sentence. No follow-up. No because. No added context unless you genuinely want to share it, not because you feel pressured. Now picture a scene that probably feels too familiar. You're visiting family on a weekend. You're sitting at the table after dinner. Someone asks about your job, your relationship, or your plans. At first it sounds neutral. Then the tone shifts. Don't you think you should be doing more by now? Or, are you sure that's stable long-term? The old reaction kicks in immediately. You feel your chest tighten. You start listing reasons. You talk about the market, your skills, your long-term plan, the sacrifices you've made. You hear yourself talking too fast. Halfway through, you realize you're not being heard, you're being evaluated. And afterward, even if no one argues back, you feel exposed and oddly resentful. Now replay that moment with the new response. The question comes. You pause, just like you practiced earlier. You feel the urge to explain. Instead, you look at the person and say, evenly, this is what works for me right now. Then you stop. You don't fill the silence. You don't justify. You let the sentence stand. The room might feel awkward for a second. That's normal. Silence is what happens when a familiar pattern breaks. Someone might push again. But have you thought about, and you repeat, calmly, I have. This is what works for me right now. You're not rude. You're not cold. You're finished. Notice what changes. The conversation either moves on, or it becomes clear that the other person wants control, not understanding. Either way, you've learned something without spending your energy. And inside, something else happens. You don't feel that same post-conversation exhaustion. You didn't abandon yourself to keep the peace. You stayed aligned. This is especially powerful with parents, because many of us learned early that explaining was how we stayed safe. We explained to avoid punishment, disappointment, or withdrawal. That habit can follow you into adulthood long after it's useful. Overexplaining is often a child strategy carried into an adult body. Emotional control means updating the strategy. Your tiny action today is specific. Pick one area of your life that your family often questions: work, money, relationships, lifestyle. Decide in advance that the next time it comes up, you will respond with one sentence only. Not two. Not three. One. This is what works for me right now. If you want to vary it slightly, you can use, I'm comfortable with this choice. But once you say it, you stop. If you catch yourself adding more, pause and return to the sentence. Now let's slow this down and train it into your body, because this is where people usually fail. The discomfort after you stop explaining can feel intense. It can feel like you're being unfair, distant, or disrespectful. That's old wiring. So take a moment right now. Sit back where you are. Drop your shoulders a little. Take a slow breath in through your nose and let it out slowly. Do that again. As you breathe, imagine a family member looking at you expectantly, waiting for you to explain yourself. Feel the urge to keep talking. Then say the sentence once, quietly, this is what works for me right now. Say it again, slower. And once more, with a steady tone, like you're not asking permission. Now add this internal reminder: I don't owe comfort at the cost of my clarity. You don't need to say that out loud. It's there to steady you when the silence feels heavy. One important nuance here. Not explaining doesn't mean never sharing. It means choosing when you share from a grounded place instead of a defensive one. There will be times you want to talk openly about your life. The difference is that you'll do it because you want connection, not because you're trying to prove your worth. When you explain from choice, it feels light. When you explain from pressure, it feels draining. If someone accuses you of being closed off, notice that as information, not an emergency. You can respond calmly with, I'm not closed off. I just don't want to debate my choices. That's still not an explanation. It's a boundary. This tool pairs directly with the pause you learned earlier. First you slow the timing. Then you simplify the content. Together, they keep you from sliding back into the old dynamic where every interaction turns into a defense of your adulthood. Hold on to this one sentence. When we move forward, we're going to add a third piece that helps you exit conversations cleanly so they don't keep looping in your head long after they're over. And later, in that Friday night situation we teased earlier, this exact sentence is one of the reasons the night stays calm instead of blowing up. Section 4. The next shift is about what you do when the conversation doesn't end cleanly. The instruction is this: stop trying to emotionally finish unfinished family conversations in your head. The stakes are heavy. If you keep replaying, correcting, and re-arguing family interactions internally, they continue to drain you long after the room is quiet, and you never actually get your energy back. Most people think the problem is the conversation itself. But the real damage often happens later. You leave a family call, dinner, or text exchange, and the words keep looping. You replay their tone. You imagine better responses. You argue with versions of them that aren't even present. Your body stays tense, like the interaction is still happening. If this never changes, family doesn't just take an hour of your time. It takes the entire evening. It hijacks your sleep. It bleeds into the next day. And over time, it trains your brain to associate family with prolonged stress instead of contained moments. Here's why this happens. Your mind is trying to regain control after feeling threatened. When something feels unresolved, the brain treats it like an open task. It keeps returning to it, searching for closure, validation, or safety. But family dynamics rarely provide clean closure. Waiting for it is like refreshing a page that never loads. A calmer, more focused version of you doesn't chase emotional closure from people who can't or won't provide it. They create their own internal stop point. This is where emotional control deepens. You don't just manage what you say. You manage what you continue to carry. Marcus hints at this in Meditations 8.47 when he reminds himself not to let external events occupy the mind longer than necessary. The interaction already happened. Replaying it doesn't protect you. It just reactivates the same stress response again and again. Here's the microscript you'll use for this stage. It's not for them. It's for you. This conversation is over for today. That's the sentence. Simple. Firm. Temporal. You're not saying it's resolved forever. You're saying it's done consuming your attention right now. Let's walk through a familiar North American scenario. You've just left a family gathering on a Sunday evening. The drive home is quiet. At first, you feel relief. Then the replay starts. You remember the comment your parents made about your finances. You remember how your sibling laughed it off. You start crafting responses you didn't say. You feel your chest tighten again. By the time you get home, you're irritated and distant, even though no one is there with you. The old pattern is to sit with this loop for hours, maybe vent to someone, maybe scroll endlessly, and maybe lie in bed staring at the ceiling. This time, you interrupt it. When you notice the loop starting, you say the sentence either out loud or internally, "This conversation is over for today." You don't argue with the thoughts. You don't try to solve them. You label the interaction as complete for now. Then you redirect your attention to something physical and immediate. You change clothes. You wash your hands. You step outside for a minute. Something that anchors you back in the present. Notice the difference. The thoughts may try to come back, but each time they do, you repeat the sentence. You're not suppressing emotion. You're setting a boundary around your attention. Slowly, your body starts to unwind. Your shoulders drop. You're breathing steadily. You don't feel amazing, but you feel contained. The interaction no longer has access to your entire night. This is especially important with family because the emotional residue is often stronger than with anyone else. Family knows your history. They touch identity-level nerves. That's why the loop feels justified. Of course I'm thinking about this, your mind says. This matters. And it does. Just not endlessly. Emotional control doesn't mean pretending it didn't matter. It means deciding how long it will matter today. Your tiny action is clear and measurable. After your next emotionally charged family interaction, decide on a cutoff time for mental replay. It could be 10 minutes. It could be the end of your commute. When that time ends, you consciously say, "This conversation is over for today," and you move your body or environment in some small way. Stand up. Drink a glass of water. Step outside. You're training your nervous system to recognize an ending. Now let's practice this slowly, because this is where the habit is built. Wherever you are right now, let your shoulders relax a little. Take a slow breath in, and let it out longer than you took it in. Do that again. Now bring to mind a recent family interaction that stuck with you longer than it should have. Don't go deep. Just enough to feel the edge of it. Notice where it lives in your body. Then say the sentence once, "This conversation is over for today." Pause. Say it again, slower. And one more time, with a calm, grounded tone. As you say it, imagine placing the interaction on a shelf. It's not gone. It's just not in your hands right now. Here's an important distinction. Ending the internal conversation doesn't mean you'll never address the issue. It means you'll address it later, if at all, from a steadier place. Most people try to resolve family issues while emotionally flooded, which almost guarantees escalation or regret. When you give yourself distance, you gain leverage. You may realize the issue isn't worth revisiting. Or you may choose a calmer moment to speak up. Either way, you're no longer reacting in real time. You might notice resistance to this. Your mind might say, "If I let this go, I'm letting them get away with it." That's a misunderstanding. You're not letting them get away with anything. You're refusing to punish yourself on their behalf. Carrying the emotional weight doesn't make you principled. It makes you tired. This tool is especially powerful before sleep. Family conversations love to resurface at night when distractions fade. If you don't set an internal boundary, your mind will keep working on the problem while your body needs rest. Saying "this conversation is over for today" before bed is an act of self-respect. It protects your recovery. And this pairs with the earlier tools. First, you delayed your response. Then, you simplified what you said. Now, you're deciding when the interaction ends internally. Together, these steps close the loop that usually stays open. You're not leaving emotional doors unlocked overnight. There's one more subtle benefit. When you stop replaying, you stop reinforcing the emotional charge of the interaction. Each replay strengthens the neural pathway. Each interruption weakens it. Over time, family comments lose some of their grip, not because they changed, but because you stopped feeding the loop. Hold on to this sentence. It will matter later. When we reach that Friday night family group chat, this is the move that keeps one comment from ruining the rest of the evening. You'll see how ending the conversation internally is sometimes the most powerful boundary you can set. Section 5. The next shift is about what you do when family tries to pull you back into old emotional roles. The instruction is this: stop accepting the role you're being assigned in the moment. The stakes are high. If you keep unconsciously stepping into the role your family expects, peacemaker, screw-up, fixer, rebel, child, you lose access to your adult authority, and every interaction quietly reinforces a version of you that no longer fits. Family dynamics are powerful because they're efficient. No one knows how to push your buttons faster. Often, they don't even need to say much. A look, a tone, a familiar phrase. And suddenly you feel yourself shrinking, bracing, or performing. This isn't random. Families tend to lock people into roles early, and then keep interacting with the role even after the person has changed. If you never interrupt this, you'll keep feeling a strange mismatch. You know you're capable and independent in your life, yet around family you feel oddly reactive, defensive, or invisible. Here's why this works psychologically. Roles simplify relationships. When someone can categorize you, they don't have to update their expectations. Your nervous system recognizes these roles instantly because they're tied to emotional memory. When the role cue appears, your body prepares to play its part. A calmer, more focused version of you notices the cue and refuses to step into it. You don't fight the role. You don't explain why it's wrong. You simply don't act it out. This is an identity-level shift. You're not trying to get your family to see you differently in real time. You're choosing to see yourself differently in their presence. As Marcus notes in Meditation 7.22, you don't need to be dragged along by impressions if you don't consent to them. The moment you stop consenting, the dynamic loosens. Here's the microscript that makes this practical. It's short and neutral. That's not the role I'm playing anymore. You won't always say this out loud. Often, you'll say it internally to orient yourself before you speak. But when needed, it can be spoken calmly, without accusation. Let's ground this in a concrete North American scene. You're at a family gathering. Someone brings up an old story about you, maybe a past mistake, a pattern you've already grown past. They laugh. Others join in. The old reaction is familiar. You feel embarrassed or irritated. You either laugh it off while feeling small, or you snap back and look overly sensitive. Either way, you leave feeling misrepresented. That's the role trap. Now the same moment with the new approach. The story starts. You feel the familiar tightening. Instead of reacting, you pause. You say the sentence internally, "That's not the role I'm playing anymore." Then you respond calmly with something like, "That was a long time ago," or "That's not really who I am now." You don't overexplain. You don't joke at your own expense. You don't escalate. You redirect. The room might feel awkward for a moment. That's okay. Awkwardness is often the sound of a pattern breaking. What changed isn't the story. It's your participation. You didn't step into the expected role. You stayed present as yourself. And that's what weakens the dynamic. This also shows up with emotional labor roles. Maybe you're the one expected to smooth things over, manage everyone's feelings, or absorb tension. Someone says something sharp, and everyone looks at you to fix it. The old habit is to jump in, lighten the mood, or meditate. But that role costs you. It keeps you responsible for emotions that aren't yours. The new move is noticing the pull and opting out. You might stay silent. You might change the subject. Or you might say, "I'm not getting into that." Calm. No drama. Your tiny action today is specific. Identify one role you're often pulled into with your family. Just one. Write it down in a note or say it clearly to yourself. Then write the counterstatement, "That's not the role I'm playing anymore." The next time you feel the pull, say the sentence internally before you respond. That moment of recognition is the intervention. Now let's slow this down, because role pressure can feel intense in the body. Take a breath in, slow and steady, and let it out fully. Do that again. Now picture a recent family interaction where you felt yourself slipping into an old role. Notice what your body did. Maybe you leaned forward. Maybe you got quiet. Maybe you felt a surge of irritation. Don't judge it. Just observe it. Then say the sentence once, "That's not the role I'm playing anymore." Say it again, slower. Let your body register the choice. Here's something important to understand. When you stop playing a role, others may briefly push harder. Not always, but sometimes. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means the system is testing whether the old pattern still works. If you hold steady, calm, respectful, consistent, the pressure usually fades. Not because they've had an emotional breakthrough, but because the cue no longer produces the expected response. You're not responsible for managing their discomfort during this transition. You're responsible for managing your integrity. Emotional control means you can tolerate a little awkwardness without betraying yourself. Another subtle benefit of this shift is internal. When you stop playing roles, you stop splitting yourself. You're no longer one person in your life and another with your family. That reduces friction. It conserves energy. You feel more coherent. And coherence is calming. This doesn't mean you'll never feel triggered again. It means when the trigger shows up, you recognize it as a role invitation instead of a command. That recognition alone creates distance. Distance creates choice. This tool builds directly on the earlier ones. You pause instead of reacting. You stop over-explaining. You end the interaction internally. Now, you also stop performing a role that keeps you stuck. Together, these shifts change the entire emotional geometry of family interactions. Keep this sentence close. When we get to that Friday night group chat later, This is the moment where you refuse to become the problem or the fixer again, and that refusal quietly changes how the night unfolds. Section 6. The next shift is about what you protect when family pressure doesn't stop at words. The instruction is this: stop negotiating your internal boundaries just to keep the interaction comfortable. The stakes are deep. If you keep bending internally to avoid tension, you teach yourself that peace is something you earn by self-erasure, and that belief quietly drains you every time. Internal boundaries are different from spoken boundaries. A spoken boundary is what you say. An internal boundary is what you decide to tolerate emotionally. Many people think they're bad at boundaries with family because they imagine confrontation, speeches, or ultimatums. In reality, the boundary often collapses long before anything is said. It collapses the moment you start second-guessing yourself, minimizing your feelings, or taking responsibility for how everyone else feels. If this never changes, family interactions keep costing you more than they should, not because of what's asked of you, but because of what you silently give up inside. Here's why this works at a nervous system level. When you prioritize keeping things smooth over staying aligned, your body stays on alert. You're scanning for reactions, adjusting your tone, anticipating disappointment. That constant monitoring is exhausting. A calmer, more focused version of you doesn't confuse harmony with health. They understand that discomfort is sometimes the price of self-respect, and that price is cheaper than chronic resentment. This is an identity shift. You move from "how do I keep this from getting tense" to "what am I willing to carry right now?" Seneca gestures toward this in letters to Lucilius when he emphasizes that peace comes from governing the self, not managing others. You can't control their reactions, but you can decide what crosses your internal line. Here's the microscript that anchors this shift. It's quiet and internal, though it can be spoken if needed. I'm allowed to feel steady even if they're uncomfortable. That sentence reframes the entire interaction. It reminds you that your job is not to absorb emotional overflow. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a North American family scenario that feels almost routine. You're on a phone call with a parent. The conversation starts fine, then drifts toward expectations: how often you visit, how you spend your time, why you made a certain decision. Nothing is overtly hostile, but you feel the pressure building. The old pattern is subtle. You soften your voice. You agree more than you mean to. You promise things you're not sure you can deliver. You leave the call feeling vaguely guilty, even though nothing explicit was demanded. That's an internal boundary breach. You didn't say yes out loud, but you said yes emotionally. You took on weight that wasn't yours. Now the same call with the new approach. The pressure starts to rise, and you notice it. Instead of rushing to soothe or explain, you say the sentence internally: I'm allowed to feel steady even if they're uncomfortable. You let there be a small pause. You respond calmly, maybe with something neutral like, I hear you, without agreeing or committing. You don't rush to fix the feeling in the room. The call ends without dramatic conflict, but something is different. You hang up and feel intact. You didn't promise away your future to buy short-term peace. This is especially important because family often communicates expectations indirectly. They hint. They sigh. They imply. If you automatically internalize those signals, you end up negotiating with ghosts. Internal boundaries stop that. You let the signal exist without absorbing it. Your tiny action today is precise. Before your next family interaction, decide on one internal boundary you will not cross. It could be, I won't agree to anything in the moment, or I won't apologize for choices I'm comfortable with, or I won't take responsibility for someone else's disappointment. Write it down or say it clearly to yourself. During the interaction, your only job is to notice when that line is approached and to pause. Now let's slow this into a practice, because internal boundaries live in the body, not just the mind. Wherever you are, sit back slightly. Unclench your jaw if it's tight. Take a slow breath in, then let it out longer than the inhale. Do that again. Now imagine a family member expressing disappointment, maybe not angrily, just heavily. Notice what your body wants to do. Maybe it wants to lean forward, to reassure, to fix. Let that urge be there. Then say the sentence silently, I'm allowed to feel steady even if they're uncomfortable. Say it again, slower. Let your body feel the permission. Here's an important clarification. Internal boundaries don't make you cold. They make you honest. When you stop managing everyone's feelings, the care you do offer becomes cleaner. You're not giving out of fear. You're giving out of choice. That's the difference between emotional labor and emotional generosity. You might notice guilt arise when you hold an internal boundary. That doesn't mean you've done something wrong. Guilt is often just a withdrawal symptom from old patterns. You trained yourself for years to equate love with self-sacrifice. When you stop doing that, the system protests. Let it protest. Don't argue with it. Just don't obey it. This shift also protects you from delayed resentment. Many people think they're being kind in the moment, only to feel angry days later. That anger isn't random. It's the cost of crossing your own internal line. When you hold the line early, resentment has less to grow on. And notice how this connects to the earlier tools. You paused before responding. You stopped overexplaining. You ended the conversation internally. You refused old roles. Now, you're also deciding what emotional weight you're willing to carry. Each step reduces friction. Together, they change how family interactions feel from the inside out. There's another quiet benefit here. When you stop negotiating internally, you become more predictable to yourself. You trust your own reactions. You're no longer surprised by how drained you feel afterward because you're not leaking energy in small, invisible ways. This doesn't mean family pressure disappears. It means it doesn't penetrate as deeply. It might brush against you, but it doesn't live in you. Hold on to this sentence. When we move forward, we're going to add a tool that helps you exit conversations, politely but firmly, when internal boundaries are close to being crossed. And later, in that Friday night family group chat, this is the moment where you don't absorb the emotional tone of the room, and that choice keeps the rest of the evening light instead of heavy. Section 7. The next shift is about how you leave a family interaction before it drains you completely. The instruction is this: stop staying emotionally available past your capacity just to avoid seeming rude or difficult. The stakes are practical and personal. If you keep staying longer than you can handle, mentally or emotionally, you turn manageable interactions into exhausting ones, and you quietly train yourself to associate family time with depletion instead of choice. Many people think emotional control means enduring. You stay on the call even when you're fried. You sit through the conversation even when your body is telling you it's enough. You keep listening while irritation builds, because leaving feels awkward or selfish. But endurance is not control. Endurance without limits is how resentment grows. If this pattern doesn't change, family interactions don't just take time, they take recovery time. You need hours, sometimes days, to feel like yourself again. Here's why excitement matters. Your nervous system has a bandwidth. When that bandwidth is exceeded, your ability to respond thoughtfully collapses. You become sharper, quieter, or more compliant than you want to be. That's when mistakes happen: snappy comments, passive-aggressive silence, promises you regret. A calmer, more focused version of you doesn't wait until collapse to disengage. They leave while they're still steady. This is an identity upgrade. You move from "I should stay because this is family" to "I leave when staying costs me alignment." That doesn't make you uncaring. It makes you sustainable. As Marcus reminds himself in Meditations 11.18, you are not required to exhaust yourself for the sake of appearances. You are required to act with reason. Here's the microscript that makes this usable in real life. It's polite, clear, and complete. I'm going to step away now. We'll talk later. That's it. No apology. No long explanation. No debate. If you need a softer version, you can say, "I'm going to head out for now. Let's catch up another time." The key is that it signals an ending, not a negotiation. Let's see how this plays out in a North American setting. You're on a Sunday afternoon video call with family. It started fine. Then opinions start stacking up about your choices, your schedule, and your priorities. Nothing explosive, just constant pressure. You feel your shoulders tighten. Your answers get shorter. You notice the urge to either snap or shut down. The old pattern is to stay anyway. You tell yourself, just 10 more minutes. Those 10 minutes turn into 30. By the time the call ends, you're irritable and disconnected. The rest of your day is half spent recovering. Now the same call with the new move. You notice the early signs, the body tension, the mental fog. Instead of pushing through, you pause. You remind yourself internally, I don't need to stay until I'm drained. Then you say calmly, I'm going to step away now. We'll talk later. There's a beat of surprise. Someone might say, already? Or, what's wrong? You don't get pulled into defending. You repeat, calmly, I just need to head out. We'll talk later. And you end the call. What changes isn't dramatic. It's internal. You stand up and realize you still have energy. You didn't say anything you regret. You didn't abandon yourself to keep the peace. You protected the relationship by protecting your capacity. This matters even more in person. Think about a family gathering where conversations come in waves. Someone corners you. The topic circles back to the same sore spot. The old habit is to stay planted, nodding, absorbing. The new move is to excuse yourself before irritation spikes. You might say, I'm going to grab some air, or I'm going to check on something real quick. You don't owe a performance. You're allowed to reposition. Your tiny action today is concrete. Decide on one exit phrase you're comfortable using. Write it down. Practice saying it out loud once or twice so it doesn't feel foreign. During your next family interaction, your only task is to notice the moment when your capacity starts to dip and to use the exit phrase before you hit zero. Not after. Before. Now let's slow this into a body-based practice, because exiting is hardest when guilt kicks in. Wherever you are, take a slow breath in and let it out fully. Do that again. Now imagine a family interaction that typically goes on too long. Feel the moment when you usually push past your limit. Notice the sensation, maybe heaviness, maybe impatience, maybe mental fatigue. Let that sensation be there. Now say the sentence once, calmly, I'm going to step away now. We'll talk later. Say it again, slower. Notice how your body reacts to the idea of leaving earlier than usual. That discomfort is the edge of a new boundary forming. Here's an important reframe. Leaving early is not rejection. It's regulation. You're not walking away from people. You're walking away from overload. When you exit before resentment builds, you're more likely to show up again without dread. That's better for everyone, even if they don't realize it. You may worry that this will upset someone. Sometimes it will. But here's the trade-off, a brief moment of someone else's disappointment versus hours of your own exhaustion. Emotional control means choosing the cost you're willing to pay. Chronic self-abandonment is far more expensive than temporary awkwardness. Also notice how this tool works with the earlier ones. You paused instead of reacting. You stopped over-explaining. You ended the conversation internally. You refused old roles. You held internal boundaries. Now, you also know how to leave. These tools form a sequence. Each one reduces pressure. By the time you exit, you're not escaping, you're concluding. There's another subtle benefit. When you leave calmly and consistently, you retrain expectations. Over time, people learn that you don't stay indefinitely, and the interaction often becomes more focused. You don't have to announce this. The pattern teaches it for you. This doesn't mean you'll never stay through discomfort. It means you're choosing when to do so. Choice is the difference between strength and endurance. Keep this exit phrase close. In the next part, we'll focus on what happens before you even walk into family spaces, how you prepare mentally so triggers land softer from the start. And later, in that Friday night family group chat, this is the moment where you step away instead of staying long enough to say something you can't take back. Section 8. The next shift happens before the interaction even starts. The instruction is this: stop walking into family situations unprepared and hoping you'll just handle it better this time. The stakes are quiet but decisive. If you don't prepare your internal posture ahead of time, you default to old reactions the moment pressure shows up, no matter how many tools you've learned. Most people think preparation is unnecessary because family interactions feel informal. You don't prepare for a phone call with your mom the way you prepare for a work meeting. You don't rehearse before a holiday dinner. You assume you'll improvise. But improvisation only works when the environment is neutral. Family environments aren't neutral. They're emotionally charged and historically loaded. If you don't set your internal stance in advance, the room sets it for you. Here's why preparation works so reliably. Your brain loves predictability. When you enter a situation without deciding who you're going to be, your nervous system fills the gap with past data. It says, last time this went badly, so brace. Or, this usually turns into pressure, so get ready to defend. That preparation happens automatically unless you replace it with a conscious one. A calmer, more focused version of you doesn't wait to see what happens. They decide their posture before anything is said. This is not about scripting conversations. It's about setting an internal rule. As Marcus reflects in Meditations 4.3, the mind can choose its own stance before events unfold. You don't control what's coming at you, but you can decide how open or guarded you'll be. Here's the microscript for this stage. It's a pre-interaction sentence you say to yourself: I'm going in steady, not to prove anything. That line quietly disarms most triggers before they land. It removes the hidden goal of winning approval, correcting misunderstandings, or defending your worth. Let's make this concrete. You're about to attend a family gathering on a Friday evening. You're getting ready at home. The old pattern starts early. You think about who will be there. You imagine the comments. You feel tension building before you even leave. By the time you arrive, you're already reactive. The first small comment tips you over because you've been bracing for an hour. Now the same situation with preparation. Before you leave, you pause for 30 seconds. You take one slow breath. You say the sentence internally: I'm going in steady, not to prove anything. You remind yourself of one earlier tool, maybe that you'll pause before responding, or that you'll leave when your capacity dips. You're not predicting conflict. You're choosing your stance. When you arrive, the room doesn't feel magically calm. But the comments land softer. You're not scanning for attacks. You're present. This also applies to digital spaces. Think about a family group chat you know can turn sideways. The old habit is to open it, already irritated, already defensive. The new move is to prepare before you read. You see the notification, and before you open it, you say, I'm going in steady, not to prove anything. That one sentence changes how you interpret what you read. You're less likely to assume intent. You're more likely to pause instead of react. Your tiny action today is specific and repeatable. Before your next family interaction, call, visit, or message, take 10 seconds to set one intention. Not a goal for them. A rule for you. It could be, I will pause before responding, or I will not explain myself, or I will leave before I'm drained. Say it once. That's enough. You're planting a flag. Now let's slow this into a short embodied practice. Wherever you are, imagine you're about to walk into a familiar family space. Feel what your body does by default. Maybe it tightens. Maybe it leans forward. Now take a slow breath in and let it out fully. As you exhale, say the sentence, I'm going in steady, not to prove anything. Say it again, slower. Notice how your shoulders drop just a little. That's preparation working. Here's an important nuance. Preparation doesn't mean rigidity. You're not locking yourself into silence or distance. You're simply removing the unconscious agenda that fuels most reactions. When you stop trying to prove something, conversations lose their edge. You're less reactive because there's less at stake internally. You might worry that this makes you detached. It doesn't. It makes you selective. You still engage when it feels aligned. You still care. You're just not entering the room with your worth on the table. This also protects you from anticipatory resentment. Many people start resenting family before anything happens. Preparation interrupts that. You remind yourself that you can handle what comes because you have options. That confidence alone lowers stress. Notice how this tool ties the whole system together. You prepare your stance before the interaction. You pause instead of reacting. You stop over-explaining. You end conversations internally. You refuse old roles. You hold internal boundaries. You exit when needed. Preparation is the glue. Without it, the tools feel harder to access. With it, they come online naturally. There's another subtle benefit. When you prepare, you become less surprised by triggers. Not because they stop happening, but because you expected the possibility. That expectation reduces shock. Reduced shock means more choice. Preparation also helps you forgive yourself faster if you slip. You don't spiral into self-criticism. You say, "I noticed it late," and you return to your stance. That flexibility keeps you from turning one misstep into a full regression. This doesn't require long rituals. It requires consistency. 10 seconds before contact is enough. Over time, your nervous system learns that family interactions are not ambushes. They're situations you can enter and exit with agency. Hold on to this pre-interaction sentence. When we move into the long story next, this is the moment that happens before everything else, the quiet decision you make before opening the group chat on a Friday night. It's what makes all the other tools usable under real pressure, when it actually counts. Section 9. It's Friday night. You're home, shoes off, finally settled after a long week. Dinner's done, the lights are low, and you're about to relax in a way that feels earned. Then your phone buzzes. It's the family group chat. You haven't opened it yet, but you already feel that familiar tightening in your chest, like your body knows what's coming before your eyes do. Before this lesson, you would have opened it immediately, already braced. Tonight, something small but important happens first. You pause. Just for a breath. You remember the decision you made earlier in the day. You say it quietly to yourself, "I'm going in steady, not to prove anything." The sentence doesn't make the message disappear, but it changes the way you enter. You open the chat. A few messages scroll by. Photos from a get-together you couldn't attend. Then it's there. A comment that lands sideways. Not openly hostile. Not kind either. Something like, "Guess some people are too busy for family these days." A sibling adds a laughing emoji. It's subtle, but it hits the old nerve. The part of you that wants to defend yourself wakes up instantly. You feel the urge to explain your week, your workload, how tired you are, how much you actually care. Your fingers hover over the screen. This is the turning point. You notice the speed. The impulse. And instead of typing, you put the phone down on the couch. Face down. You hear yourself think the sentence you practiced earlier, "I don't have to answer this right now." You don't force calm. You just create space. You stand up and walk to the kitchen. You pour a glass of water. While it fills, your shoulders are still tense. You take one slow breath in, hold it briefly, and let it out. Then another. The edge softens. The story in your head slows down. You're no longer in the courtroom arguing your case. A few minutes later, you pick up the phone again. You reread the message. It still isn't great, but it doesn't feel like an emergency anymore. You notice something else too. The comment is inviting a role. The defensive one. The overexplainer. The version of you that scrambles to be understood. You recognize it for what it is. You say internally, that's not the role I'm playing anymore. You start typing, then stop. You feel the urge to add context, reasons, and justifications. You remember the second tool. You don't need to overexplain. You choose one clean line. You type, I've had a heavy week. Hope you're all having a good night. And you stop. No follow-up. No explanation of why you couldn't be there. You send it. Almost immediately, another message pops up. A parent replies with something like, we just miss you. It's softer, but it carries weight. The old you would have absorbed that weight fully, felt guilty, promised more than you could give. You feel the internal pull start. This is where the internal boundary matters. You say to yourself, I'm allowed to feel steady even if they're uncomfortable. You reply once more, calmly, I know. I care about you. And that's it. You don't add a promise. You don't schedule something on the spot. You let the sentence stand. There's a pause in the chat. Then the topic shifts. Someone posts a photo of a pet. The emotional pressure releases a notch. You feel a small wave of relief, but it's not over yet. The thoughts try to come back. Part of you wonders if you should have said more. If you were cold. If you'll be judged later. You notice the loop starting. You intervene. You say the sentence you practiced, this conversation is over for today. You don't argue with the thoughts. You just label the interaction as complete. You put the phone down again, this time more easily. You sit back on the couch. You notice something surprising. Your body isn't buzzing. Your jaw isn't tight. The night still feels like yours. You didn't win anything. You didn't fix anyone. But you didn't lose yourself either. A little later, the phone buzzes again. Another message comes in, unrelated. You glance at it, then decide you're done for the night. You remember the exit tool. Even in a digital space, you don't have to stay available indefinitely. You mute the chat until morning. Not dramatically. Just deliberately. Before bed, as you brush your teeth, you notice the difference. Normally, this is when the replay would start. You'd be rehearsing better lines, feeling annoyed, half resentful. Tonight, the memory of the exchange feels contained. It happened, and now it's done. You say it one more time, almost as a closing ritual, this conversation is over for today. When you lie down, your mind drifts instead of spins. You fall asleep without that familiar knot in your stomach. And here's the real payoff. It's not that your family suddenly changed. It's that you didn't hand them your entire evening. You responded as the adult you are now, not the version of you they still remember. The next morning, you wake up without the emotional hangover. No urge to rehash. No regret about what you said. Just a quiet sense of having stayed aligned. You realize something important. Emotional control with family isn't about one perfect response. It's about stacking small choices, pause, simplicity, boundaries, exit, preparation, until the old pattern doesn't run the show anymore. That Friday night didn't become a story you'd tell for years. It became something better. Forgettable. And that's how you know it worked. Section 10. What this episode was really about is the difference between reacting and responding when family presses the oldest, most sensitive buttons you have. Reacting is fast, automatic, and familiar. Responding is slower, chosen, and grounded. The point was never to fix your family or make them suddenly understand you. The point was to stop handing over your emotional control the moment a familiar tone, comment, or expectation appears, and to leave interactions feeling like yourself instead of feeling pulled apart. We started by naming the real problem. Family conversations don't just trigger emotions, they activate long-standing patterns that bypass logic if you don't interrupt them. Then you learned how to slow everything down by refusing to reply immediately, so urgency stopped making decisions for you. After that, you stopped overexplaining, which quietly removed you from the position of defending your adulthood or justifying your choices under pressure. Next, you learned how to end conversations internally, so they don't keep replaying in your mind and draining your evening long after the interaction is done. Then you saw how family roles keep pulling you back into versions of yourself you've already outgrown, and how simply refusing to step into those roles weakens the entire dynamic. From there, you practiced holding internal boundaries, so you no longer negotiate your peace just to keep things comfortable. You learned how to exit conversations early and cleanly, before irritation turns into regret or resentment. Then you tied all of it together with preparation, deciding who you're going to be before you walk into the room or open the message, instead of hoping you'll magically handle it better this time. Finally, you watched all of these tools work together under real pressure in that Friday night family group chat, where the biggest success wasn't winning an argument, but keeping the night calm, contained, and forgettable. The deeper lesson underneath all of this is simple but powerful. Emotional control with family isn't about toughness or silence. It's about sequence. When you pause, simplify, contain, refuse old roles, hold internal lines, exit when needed, and prepare in advance, the system that used to pull you off balance no longer has the same leverage. You're not suppressing emotion. You're directing it. You're not cutting people off. You're choosing how close they get to your nervous system. To lock this in, here are exactly 3 things to do today. First, identify one family contact or group chat that reliably spikes your emotions and set a firm reply delay of at least 45 minutes for anything that feels charged. Not as a suggestion. As a rule. Follow it once today so your body learns the pause is real. Second, choose one boundary sentence you will use instead of overexplaining, such as "this is what works for me right now," and practice stopping after that sentence the next time the familiar topic appears, even if the silence feels uncomfortable. Third, decide on one clear exit point for your next family interaction, either time-based or body-based, and leave when you reach it, not after you're drained and irritable. If this lesson hit close to home, the next one you'll want to watch is about holding boundaries without guilt, especially when people react emotionally to your change. That lesson goes deeper into the discomfort that shows up after you stop playing your old role, and how to stay steady when others push back harder precisely because you're no longer predictable. If you want a whole library of Stoic Focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships, this is what we build here week after week. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.